welcome you, Michael Cotayo. Again, this is Dr. Rogers, Leslie Rogers, a mental health professional and clinician. And, I started doing these Food for Thought Thursdays with Dr. Rogers to spread awareness on mental health. And I think it's been so awesome. I love doing it. And so I'm doing this every Thursday with different topics. And like you, I'll have guests on as well. So yeah. So just to give the viewers a little bit about you, I'll just read your bio a little bit. Of course, you know how to handle difficult people because you was one. You were a difficult person, surviving a traumatic brain injury. You overcame his own addiction to drugs. He then went on to devote over 20 years of his professional life as a clinical social worker, servicing the needs of the mentally ill and chemically addicted. As an expert in treating patients with borderline personalities, Mike has delivered keynotes internationally, including speaking at the European Association of Gestalt, therapy in Sicily. Besides his career as a clinical social worker, Mike has also achieved acclaim as a stand-up comedian, where he's discovered the power of humor to heal. He has headlined at the Laugh Factory in New York City, as well as Binghamton University, Columbia University, and Kansas State University. Awesome. We welcome you, Mike Cotayo, to Food for Thought Thursdays with Dr. Rogers. I thought your story was really an inspiration, and that's why I wanted you to come on. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Very much. Sure, I'd love to. I hate when people read those bios, like it makes, so the one thing I've been doing this a long time, and as a performer, everyone wants you to write a bio, and I think it's so narcissistic. Like you're writing it in, and then when I have to hear it be read, I'm like, no, la 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 la. Because it's just I really hate hearing everything. I was at a show for the New Jersey Traumatic Brain Injury Association, and they were reading the bio from the stage, and I yelled out, please don't read that, just let me know.
You know what it is? It's that standard, standard professional standard thing that they do, right?
Right.
When you're in the government and when you're public speaking and et cetera, you're having guests come up, the standard is to read a bio.
I know, and I would just rather people say, this next guy's crazy, come on, bring him on. So
thanks for that tip. You should tell people that. Yeah, listen, when they ask for a bio, say, listen, I'm going to tell you what to say. Just tell them, come on out here and do his thing.
So yeah, I'm a social worker. I work as a psychotherapist now, and I also work as a stand-up comedian. I did that for a few years as my primary source of employment, and that was rough. Like it was making ends meet, doing things day by day. Like I would get social work jobs for like 2 weeks at a time just to have enough money to make my rent, and then go do those gigs. And it was great. I really do enjoy being a social worker, and I really enjoy making people laugh. And a few years ago, when I started doing psychotherapy, I realized I can combine the two. I could really make an impact by helping people. And while they're telling me their stories, help them to laugh, to go a little bit deeper. Because what I learned is when you have someone who is telling you such a traumatic story, they're diving in deep, they're really losing themselves, they're feeling all their emotions. And if you give them just a little glimpse of humor or laughter, they can come out of that and regain themselves and then go a little bit deeper. So
what made you come to that? Yeah. What made you think about comedy? Like, what was the inspiration in your life that brought you to comedy?
Oh my God. I've had, like, if I didn't have a sense of humor, I'd be dead. I tell people that, like, when I was 18 months old, I was in a drunk driving accident. I don't know who decided to give me the keys at 18 months old, but it was a pretty bad accident, and I ended up being in a coma, and I lost the use of my left side. So growing up, I had a physical disability. I eventually ended up walking, but I walk with a limp, and I really couldn't use my left arm at all. In fact, nowadays I call my wife Two Hands when I need her to help me out with something. Hey, Two Hands, could you come here and get this for me? And so as I got older, I learned to deal with people staring at me. I learned to deal with people not knowing what to say or what to do. And as a really young kid, like 7 years old, I learned if I made people laugh, they wouldn't feel sorry for me. So I became the jokester. I became the person who would make people laugh and be kind of funny. And in my family, this is weird. In my family, I'm not the funny one. Like my brother was always the one who could make my mother laugh. My cousin is one of the funniest people you would ever want to meet, just natural. But it's a skill we all have. It's something I worked on because I realized it would really help me to not be treated differently.
Yeah. And did that seem to work?
For the most part. I mean, you know, I learned that people, when they laugh, they feel better about themselves. And if I had someone coming at me who was a little reticent to interact with someone who was disabled, if I made them laugh, they felt at ease. Like I had a friend in college, we're still friends, and she once said to me, you know, I didn't know how to act around someone who was disabled, and then you made me laugh, and I was just like, oh, he's like anybody else. So, you know, I find it's really helpful.
And that makes sense. You know, I would imagine with her saying that oftentimes people do feel they don't know what to say. You like you're not approachable, or and it's just that they get to know you, then they'll see that, oh, like you said, he's just any other person, right?
Yeah, it's hard. It's one of the hardest things. Like, and then, you know, I ended up. This is funny. Like, so going through my own journey, I went to social work school, and I thought that social work school would fix me. And then I graduated with my degree, and I remember being really sad, and I couldn't figure out why I was sad. And then my dad was trying to talk to me, and I was blowing him off, and he goes, I don't understand. You went to school to learn how to talk to people, and you can't even have a simple conversation with me. And I said, you know, I'm sorry. It's just I feel like I'm still disabled. I thought this would somehow fix me, and it didn't. So, you know, it was. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I said it did. I think that a lot of times, like when we go to like, especially when you go to school for psychology or mental health, you start to process things about yourself too, in a deeper context.
Exactly. I mean, you must know. You start to think, oh, I have this or I have this. You start diagnosing yourself with stuff,
which is the worst, right? If you look on the internet and get a diagnosis for yourself, I'm sure I will meet every diagnosis there is.
Exactly. My mom came up to me and she's like, what have you diagnosed me with? I'm like, nothing, Mama, nothing at all.
Yeah. But I'm sure you can agree with me that once you start to process and get to know yourself more, then you're better able to interact with others as well, because then you have a better awareness of yourself.
Exactly. And it's so it's so freeing to be able to have this knowledge and not use it, but have it be in the back. Have you,
Right.
Dr. Leslie, have you ever gone on a date and someone, like I had this once where I was out on a date and this woman goes, so you're a psychotherapist? I said, yeah, and she goes, are you gonna analyze me? I started laughing. I'm like,
Yeah.
listen, we only do that when the crazy is so obvious you can't ignore it.
Right. Or the one you get where you're a therapist, you should know how to handle everything. You're a psychologist, you should know how to handle everything, right?
Right.
Like a psychologist, you know everything, know all, right?
You're super good.
Yeah. Right. So what about support systems? It sounds like you've had a really good support system, growing up.
I do. My family is really tight. And but my mom and her family and my aunt's family all grew up really close together. So it's a huge extended family. And one of my cousins just had a baby. So shout out to Eileen, congratulations. Her son was born last year and her daughter was born this year, and they're so close up together in age. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So it helped me to kind of have people on my side. Like, I grew up in a very sports dominated family. Like, everybody plays sports and I couldn't really play sports, so I felt on the outs with that. But everything else was, we all had fun, we all joked around. They're my biggest support. And I've never moved away from New York because I can't stand being away from my family. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I asked you about support systems because it really makes a difference when you have a positive support system, especially when you grow up with a disability, right? Some, oftentimes, research will show that when you, what is it called? When a person with you enable them, right? Serve as an enabler by, babying them, pampering them, and things of that sort. And it sounds like your support system actually allowed you to be more freer and learn from. Yeah.
My mom was great about that. Like, my mom, so I had a problem walking, and I don't know if they did this intentionally or not, but my bedroom was on the second floor. So I had to learn how to navigate steps.
Right.
And do it that way. And like, that was the best gift they could have given me, because I'm able to do things without complaining or without fear. And when I was 14, I traveled into Manhattan on my own. So it was just, those coming of age things that everybody takes for granted, I was able to do too because of the support system.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for sharing your story. So when we talk about humor, I want to go back to comedy for a second. I listened to your podcast the other day, and you were on the phone with a gentleman, and you guys were talking about humor and, how it interacts, how it presents laughter. And he was talking about how it interacts with the amygdala and different parts of the brain, like the frontal cortex, frontal lobe, and things of that sort. So when you did research on that, of course, what did you find?
Humor and laughter engage different parts of the brain. Like, what makes us laugh comes from one part of the brain, and what we find funny comes from another part of the brain. So when you have a sense of humor, you're utilizing more than one area of the brain, which is fascinating, because then you get to really, those synapses get to work together, and you're using more brain power, I would think, than if you're not laughing. And with trauma, I'm in the middle of researching this for my program that I'm starting. But for trauma, when we have a traumatic experience, it lives in one area of the brain. And humor, I believe, don't quote me on this, I got a fact check, but humor, I believe, is stored in the area that is next to that area. So that synapse lights up and it affects the other.
Right.
It affects the trauma in a positive way.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that it is so important to be able to deal with your trauma and laugh about it at the same time. And it's a funny thing. Like I was working with this woman yesterday, in fact, who was telling me about the abuse she endured as a child, and she started to shut down. And she asked me what I thought about what she was telling me, and I said, well, I thought I need to insert a laugh at some point, but I don't want to minimize her pain. So I'm just gonna be my authentic self and let that come out. And so what I said to her, well, you tell me what you think first, and then I'll give you my opinion. And then I stopped and goes, I'm sorry, I mean hypothesis. I am a professional, at least. And then I smiled at her, and she got the joke, and she came out of it and chuckled. And then she goes, yeah, you're a scientist, and made me laugh. And then she went even deeper in the work because she had that moment of reprieve.
Yeah. Well, I know that, research shows that the amygdala has to do with PTSD. So that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and, I was doing a little research too. And, there's research out there on like laughter and happiness as a potential method to reduce stress. So it would make sense that it would like improve the quality of life, right? Laughter, improve the quality of life and somehow. Yeah, and again, when you talk about, incorporating laughter and humor into your sessions, that makes sense too, because I use it to build rapport.
Of course.
Several sessions are rapport building. So absolutely, of course you feel the client and see, how it goes. But absolutely, I in the beginning of sessions to build that rapport, to let them see that I'm human.
That's the number one rule of stand-up: know your audience. So one joke will definitely not go over with one person, and it'll be a big deal with another. So.
Right.
May I ask you a question? I know this is my interview, but I'm so curious about you. Could you tell me a little bit about yourself? Like, what do you do?
Oh, absolutely. So I was a psychologist for the VA for veterans, and now I'm independent professionally.
Okay.
Yeah, my background is let me tell you, I have a unique story. I was law enforcement for 25 years.
Wow.
In intelligence field. And I decided to jump out on faith and leave my stable job and become a doctor. Yeah, so, when I hear you talk, I empathize with that because like you, I too went into psychology to better understand myself.
Right. And
better understand experiences that I've gone through and things of that sort, right? So, it was scary at first to jump out there, but, once I'm out there, I love it. I love the work. I love working with veterans particularly, but I love, working with people and processing, it's that deep processing that allows us to understand what we're going through, especially those trauma experiences, right? And you work with trauma, so avoidance is high.
Oh,
yeah. High, right?
And I want to normalize things like dissociation because we all need that break. I used to, when I didn't want to talk about something, I used to fall asleep, like because of, and it's funny, I just realized this. I just got my driver's license last year. And when I had it, it took me 6 months of lessons and then to pass the test because I was so worried about crashing. And when I used to get into cars on long car rides, I would fall asleep. Like that was my body's way of dealing with the stress, just going to sleep.
So I'm getting heard. I'm told that people can't hear. Can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
No, I think because you're in this room. I think when we did this room interview, it put us in a room. When you came on here, did you use that link?
Yeah, I used the link that you sent me.
Not you, I'm asking. So let me ask you, I'm going to read a question by Dina real quick, and then I'm going to troubleshoot. So Dina, her comment actually was, the science of the brain is fascinating. Your research is so interesting to possibly link humor and laughter. Yeah,
it really is, right? Like I for years, I thought this was fascinating work. And so I would just go and talk to people and see how they deal with stress and how they deal with trauma. And I've done a lot of presentations on using humor to really deal with when you're feeling angry or stressed or trauma. I worked in a day treatment program for people with AIDS, and I had this client who was so angry all the time. And one day he was going off in the day room and just yelling at people and being a nuisance. And I walked up to him and I patted his shoulder and I go, "Hey, good morning, sunshine." And it really changed him. He started laughing immediately.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, every time he saw me, he smiled. And I started calling him Sunshine every time I saw him, because and it's just using that little bit of humor, that little joke, that little inside joke that changed him.
But I think sometimes, and you could give me your opinion about this, I think sometimes we're afraid to let it becomes a defense mechanism. Like, our defenses are to, be like guarded.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So, yeah, especially when you're talking about trauma. So when you're guarded, to become vulnerable and let your hair down per se, right? It's a scary thing.
Right. And no one wants to be made fun of. Like I think for people in our profession, that's the big fear, is if I use humor, will the person I'm helping think I'm making fun of them? And like that's the biggest thing. I don't want anyone to feel that way. So I make sure to do it very carefully.
Right, exactly. So let me ask you, when you talked a little bit about that, what do you see as the forefront of using humor?
I think there are so many benefits. I think that people live longer if they're happier. People get more joy from their interactions. People feel like, I can choose to be miserable and let things bother me, or I can choose to be happy and let things roll off my back. I would rather let things roll off my back, because then everything else becomes secondary.
Right.
And I think humor is at the forefront of our field. Not just with counseling, with all disciplines, with nursing, with doctors. I'm working with a physical therapist now who is starting to use humor in his work.
Yeah. And you're right. I think that, when we get in our professions, and I hear it all the time when they say, providers, I feel like I'm just another number, right?
Right.
I think that we get so wrapped up into our professions. And then with everything going on, like the pandemic and other things, you know, we're so busy and overwhelmed, you know, you can't really find time to integrate humor. So it's like you get lost in your job.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that this changes the healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then how do you think, how do you think people can integrate humor into their lives? What would you say?
I think the first step is knowing what makes you laugh. Like, because you've got to know what makes you laugh before you can make anybody else laugh. Like, and so what's different about this work is I don't say go into the session and make jokes. I say go into the session, be your authentic self, and let your personality shine through. And with that, it's humanistic, and it becomes easier to make people, to be more relational with people, to make them see where you're coming from. When I became a social worker, I always thought I never want to be a therapist because I never wanted to lose my ability to be myself with people. And I thought I was under the misconception that that was what I needed to do if I was going to be a counselor, if I was going to be a psychotherapist. And then I met a supervisor who was so authentically herself and used her sense of humor and used her creativity that I thought, I could do this. And I found out what program she went to, what training program, and about a year or two later, I joined that program. And it really helped to shape the person I became and how I work.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that because, you know, when you talk about how you go about therapy and incorporating humor and how I incorporate humor, it's like atypical. And oftentimes I have people define what they think therapy is when they come to, what do you think therapy is? Because I think based on experiences, it influences how you look at therapy, how you think of therapy, your perception of what therapy is going to be like when you come into the session, right? So, you know, to see a provider, you know, or a psychologist, a provider, a mental health provider, a social worker, et cetera, engage in humor, that might be atypical for what somebody is actually used to.
Right. And just think about it. We as people always feel better when we're laughing, when we're smiling, when we're having a good time. And when people say to me, I don't like therapy, or I don't, it's not fun for me. I'm like, well, let's look at it, because I'm not here to make you miserable. I'm here to help you. And if I can do that in a way where you're not feeling horrible all the time, I want to do that.
Right. But when you talk about trauma, I can imagine someone saying that, right? Because therapy might not be, because when you do therapy and for trauma and you're the first few sessions of therapy, you know, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good at all because you're processing all that stuff, right? So it doesn't feel good. And in the beginning, I would imagine that they wouldn't like therapy.
No. And like, that's where my technique, or what I do, I call it a technique. It doesn't really feel like a technique. It's what I do. It's just, I will poke fun at the situation that they experience and laugh with them. Like I said to you, I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing with you. Like, I'm helping you, I'm trying to help you experience how to feel better about your situation.
Right. Exactly. Well, I think that it's a wonderful thing to incorporate humor into therapy, especially when dealing with trauma survivors, because I think that they need that outlet, you know, they need that outlet to kind of decompress, to de-stress, right? So I think it's an awesome idea. So, okay, so you're a comedian. Give us a joke. Would you mind giving us?
We hate when people do that. We hate when people do that.
No. So, but if you like
I don't go to law enforcement and say, you're a cop, where the donuts? Like, you know. See, look at that. Look at that. She's like, I saw that face. That was like, ooh, that hit too close to home.
I had to process that for a minute. I didn't eat a lot of donuts when I was in law enforcement. I drank a lot of coffee. Ate a lot of bagels.
I will tell you this. I've been married. I got married in October, and like, I am so glad dating is over. I'm so glad I don't date anymore, because dating was really hard for me. Because I never knew if they liked me for me, or they were just in it for the parking spaces.
That went over my head. You said that they would just.
Sorry.
That's okay. They were in it for you. Absolutely. 100% claim it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, what if you were to give advice on, you know, trauma survivors, you know, especially like traumatic histories? And when you define trauma can, let me tell you, when you talk about PTSD, the first thing that comes to a person's mind is war veterans and things that. Right. But it's such a, you know, umbrella, you know, under a trauma.
Yeah, trauma can be anything. I work a lot with male sexual assault survivors, child abuse victims, adult child abuse survivors, and people with borderline personality disorder. Like,
yeah.
So that's my kind of wheelhouse. It's what I've gotten good at. And so those are really deep traumas. But, you know, anything can be a trauma. We want to make sure people feel accepted. And the one piece of advice I could give to anyone is to be authentic, because that's where your personality shines through.
Yeah. Do you think that that's an innate ability, or do you think that, you know, it's something that has to be learned?
Being authentic, or
being authentic, being an authentic self?
I think it would be really, I think everyone's authenticity is different for everyone. So it's how comfortable you are with being real, right?
Yeah.
I can only be authentic if I'm being real with myself. You know, in my training, when people come into therapy, they're at all their issues are not in the forefront of their minds. Like they're in what we call games layer, where everything is kind of not taken seriously. It's when they dive into the work that they realize, oh, I can start to change things.
Right. Exactly. I know that I've done.
The one thing the program that I went to, the Gestalt program, taught me was that I as a person, as a provider, need to respect people's differences. Like I can't come at someone who is just, you know, dissociating and judge that, because that's what they learn to do to survive. So I need to respect that.
Yeah. We talked about it earlier, those, you know, those guardedness, those defenses, right? It's about keeping yourself safe. And when it comes to trauma, that's your main goal, to keep yourself safe. That's how come that trust, you know, becomes, you know, is a question. The trust, you know, the being able to interpersonal difficulties with the borderline personality, you know, those characteristics there. It's about safe and keeping yourself safe, right? And being able to trust whomever you're in session with, right? Trust that you can open up without being judged in turn. And that means we have to understand ourselves when we go into that room as well.
Exactly. Exactly. That's so important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let me see. More people have joined. Does anyone have any questions for Mike Cotayo? Again, we're talking about trauma and integrating humor in trauma. I see Tanya, you're there. Would you like to ask any questions about integrating humor in your profession where you are? Anyone else have any questions?
Hi, Melissa. I see you waving.
Hi, Melissa. How are you? I think I'm wondering how you guys figured out how to get in the room. There were other people that said that they couldn't hear you on the live, but there's something about when you go and do this, when you go and do an interview with more than one person, it directs you to a room.
I would say check out StreamYard.
I wrote that down.
It's a great tool to live stream on Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this has been such an awesome experience, being here talking with you and getting knowledge from you. I'm so glad that you came, and I thank you for disclosing, information about yourself. I think that, it's helpful when, especially trauma survivors, when they know that we're not the only one. Right.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it, and I'm excited to get to know more about you as time goes on.
I am, I have some. Oh, and that's what I wanted you to talk about just really quickly. What are upcoming projects that you have?
Oh, I am actually knee deep in creating an online program for how to incorporate humor into your work as a healthcare professional. Like okay. My launch date is February 22nd. Hopefully that's the date we stick with. It's been a really weird year. The guy who was designing my website died of COVID, so I had to get somebody else, and so we'll see how it pans out. But I'm really excited. It's a really innovative program. I'm gonna have people come on and do their own webinars. Like the person who was on my my podcast, he's gonna do an episode, a webinar as well. That will be amazing because he really dived into the brain, its use of humor.
Like it, yeah. And then you have a podcast. Tell us about your podcast.
I have a podcast called the Funny Shrink Podcast. I live stream it to my page every week. We have one coming up tomorrow with a good friend of mine who's going to be on talking about her projects and what she does and the stuff she's survived. And I know that's very specific. And so we're moving forward, and I have a great co-host. I adore him, Frank King. He survived suicide. He has he bills himself as the mental health comedian. He does a lot of work in suicide prevention, and he's phenomenal.
Oh, I have to have him on.
Yeah, you should. He's great.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so not this week, on February 18th, I'm having Dr. Natasha Kalia come on and talk about COVID, the vaccine. That's going to be really important. Like if any of you guys have friends that want to come on to Food for Thought Thursdays with Dr. Rogers, she's going to come and you can ask any questions that you want to ask about the vaccine and how that works in that. And so I think that's going to be really good.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I hope you
so much.
Yeah, I hope you check us out every week. There's something you're interested in. And I thank you again for coming on Food for Thought Thursdays.
I loved it. Have a great day.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.